Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to U.S. Congressman Petersburg.
Thank you for that great introduction, Bart. If you don't mind, I might steal a couple of those one-liners there. They were right on point, accurate. And also, you did mention I'm on the minimum wage challenge, so if I faint at any point, that's the reason I fainted. Hopefully it's not because of the questions. I'm sticking to a budget of $17 a day on what I can trying to see what it's like to live on the minimum wage. So anyway, thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for the introduction. Janet, thank you for your leadership here. And thank everyone for being here. I look forward to all the questions. I look forward to hearing from everybody. I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your busy day to be here and share some of your thoughts and ideas. Just in the way of background, I'm from the Florida Keys. I'm a conch, if anybody knows what that is. Grew up in our outdoors, fishing and diving. My mom always jokes with me when I got elected to Washington, I had to buy a suit, and she said, son, these are the first pair of socks you're going to get here. You better get used to it. I love my experience in D.C. thus far. The weather is something I'd like to change, that's for sure. So I got into politics at an early age, you would say, and a lot of that is based on some of my experiences getting there. See, I grew up in a family business of construction. My dad is a traditional Irish guy, never graduated college, and said, son, your first job is going to be digging holes in pouring concrete. In college, I was a day laborer, worked my way through college, and thought about joining the family business of construction right after I graduated, and decided I wanted to kind of earn my own stripes and do my own thing, so ended up getting my CPA license. Worked at Deloitte & Touche for several years as an auditor. And if you all remember, in 2010, the BP oil spill happened. And there was a lot of talk of that oil getting in Florida's, in the blue current coming out Florida's west coast through the Keys. And no one in the Keys was talking about what they're going to do to clean up or be prepared. And I said, heck, what a great opportunity to get involved. Put together some oil skimmers and basically moved to New Orleans for about 6 months. And that was my first real eye-opener to government and its involvement in all of our lives. And if you remember in 2010, that was when the Tea Party movement really started. And I started paying attention to what was being discussed, the issues at hand. Whether it was the debt, whether it was unemployment, whether it was health care, immigration, foreign affairs, pick an issue. I said, heck, each and every one of these issues are probably going to affect my generation, right? Some of the high school students here, my kids, my grandkids, a lot more than my parents and grandparents. But when I talk to my friends, on a Sunday watching a football game or something, they all say, oh, Murph, that's not our problem, someone else is going to deal with that. That's not the answer. We all better get more involved in our community and government, because the decisions being made at every level of government are going to affect all of us and future generations. So as Barclay said in his introduction, I threw my hat in the ring in 2012, ran against Alan West, and ended up winning in that race that turned out to be the most expensive congressional race in history. $30 million was spent. So you better believe I want to get the money out of politics. And got elected in a very close election, won by 0.5%, 2,000 votes. Talking about a lesson of how important every single vote is. And I get elected to the Congress, and you have orientation. It's kind of like starting college. They teach you, how to vote and how to do an amendment and the safety, and just the basic stuff. But what do? They say, well, look, Patrick, you're a Democrat. They're going to be here in the room with all the other Democrats. And then they put the Republicans in another room. And for the first 3 weeks, you basically don't even meet each other. I said, what the world is that? Regardless of what party you are, if you're going to solve a problem, you better find the middle ground. And for the folks here in business, or anybody with a family would know, you rarely get 100% of what you want. If you get 80% of a deal, take that deal and move on to the next issue. So I was very frustrated my first couple of weeks. So I was introduced to a freshman Republican from North Carolina. And we ended up starting a bipartisan group called United Solutions. Got about 50% of the freshman class to come together to talk about our fiscal house. We realized that we had a lot of agreement, a lot of the social issues we didn't quite see eye to eye on, but we said, let's talk about the things we agree on. And we were to put forward several pieces of legislation. One of them was called the SAVE Act. This bill will re-identify $479 billion wasteful, duplicative, fraudulent government spending. Think of that. We found that in several months. Think of how much there really is. And that's all of our money. That's taxpayer money. And we were able to get several pieces of this passed. There's a lot more to do. And the truth is, some of the things that happened along the way and getting that bill to the floor woke me up to just how broken Washington is. There was a Republican, I won't go, I don't need to say his name, and I'm not trying to sound partisan here because both parties are guilty of this, but he wouldn't sign on the bill with me because he said, Patrick, that might make you look good. It might give you a good headline back home, and we're trying to beat you in your re-election, so I can't sign up for that. And, I was told if I help you, I'm going to, be dropped from my committee and probably blocked from raising any money. What in the world is that? We've got serious problems in this country. And I think we are on our way back to recovery. But it's not about the Republicans and the Democrats. It's about America and about putting the country first. Right? And I've had some great experiences in the House and been blessed to be on two very interesting committees. One of those is the Financial Services Committee. That oversees housing, oversees insurance, and capital markets. And one of the things I've really tried to prioritize has been in the insurance market. I think you're all familiar here with flood insurance and the rate increases we've seen. I've seen in my district some folks having 1,000, 2,000% increases in flood insurance. So one of the bills we put forward and actually passed unanimously 2 days ago in the committee, I worked with Congressman Dennis Rossland's bill. We basically were able to improve on the bigger waters flood bill. For those of you that don't follow this every day, the National Flood Insurance Program is about $25 billion in debt. They passed some legislation several years ago to try to improve that. One of the clauses in the bill would allow for more private sector involvement. However, there was a bottleneck with the Fed, the FDIC, the OCC, the banking regulators to determine what they call equivalent or better. You see, right now, you can get flood insurance with NFIP, and the private sector can get involved if they meet that equivalent or better standard. But the banking regulators weren't putting that standard out. So we said, look, flood insurance should be regulated like every other insurance at the state commission level. Let them determine that equivalent or better standard. So they meet those minimum standards. And if Florida wants to have tougher standards than Nebraska or Alaska, then so be it. But the point of the bill is to get more private sector involved, more competition into flood insurance, thereby bringing down the prices. So that bill passed unanimously in the committee. I'm told it's going to pass overwhelmingly in the House, and we have a Senate companion we're working on, and already talked to the administration about that. The other committee that I'm on in the Congress is the House Intelligence Committee. People always joke, Governor, they say, this is an oxymoron, unfortunately, in the House, but the Intelligence Committee does exist. It's about 20-some folks on it, and it's been the most fascinating thing I've been involved with in the Congress. There's no cameras, there's no cell phones. Right? Everything, of course, is off the record. We meet 100 feet underground in the Capitol and talk about some of the challenges facing this country. After the committee, you spend your time so scared about some of the threats we face, whether it's hard assets that are going after, whether it's cyber threats. But the other half, you're just so appreciative of those folks, not only in uniform, but the folks that aren't in uniform, protecting this country, right? Putting their life on the line every single day for our freedoms and our opportunities. The truth is, there's a lot of threats facing this country. There's a lot more we have to do. And this is a committee that's been so interesting to me, not only because of what we're learning, what we're trying to do, but because it's bipartisan. You see, when the cameras are off and the microphones are off, people aren't, pointing a finger and blaming the president or the former president. You actually have to solve the problem, get things done. And that's been one of the really unique opportunities and experiences I've had, in the Congress. And I hope that sort of, getting along, that same sort of energy we have there, we can spread throughout the rest of Congress, but we haven't been able to do that yet. And there's so many things I can talk about with the Intelligence Committee and happy to answer any questions. But one thing, in particular, I do want to point out, because I know there's a lot of folks here in the private sector, that cybersecurity is arguably one of the biggest threats to this country. And the more that we all get connected with our internet and Facebook and our computers are going up in the cloud, all of our information is really open to and so vulnerable. That is where a lot of these, whether they're state-sanctioned regimes or sort of one-off lone wolf regimes, are trying to get out of this country. And it's an area that I'm very focused on and believe we have to start investing a lot more money to protect not only the citizens, the businesses, universities, and all the government entities. And you've seen some of the recent hacks from OPM to several other agencies where our private information is being stolen by other state actors. So there's a lot we need to do with that. And look, I've enjoyed my first couple of terms in the House. I was blessed to win my re-election in a district that meant Romney won by about, he won it by 4%. I was blessed to win my re-election by 20%. And attribute that to getting things done for the district. I didn't worry about my re-election. I worried about doing my job. I represent the third most senior district in the whole country. And I'm the second youngest member of Congress, so a nice juxtaposition. And we're able to help a lot of seniors, help a lot of veterans. I was able to bring home about $2 billion to help clean up the environment and some of the water discharges we have at Lake Okeechobee. I feel like we've got a lot done. But the truth is, there's quite a few issues that we're not making progress in. And the House, right now, is playing small ball. There's no vision, right? There's no more foresight. And I decided to run for the U.S. Senate because I believe I can make an even bigger difference on the issues that I care about. I think the issues we all care about by being in the Senate. And that's not to say it's perfect there. Right? There's still plenty of fights and plenty of things I wish we could change. But there's more opportunities to sit down with folks on the other side of the aisle. Get an expert in any issue in the world you want into your office. We don't really have a conversation about that issue and how do you solve it. Right? How do you make improvements? How do you move the ball forward? And there's so many issues that I could talk about and so many things I care so much about, but there's two issues in particular that I don't think we have 15, 20 years to get right. The first one is the disappearing middle class in this country. Income inequality. Right? You think about what's made America so unique. And one of those factors is that strong middle class that we have. And I believe it's going to take some real investments in America to rebuild it. You think of technology, automation, what's going on. Unfortunately, we are probably going to displace more jobs because of technology and automation in the next 5 to 10 years than we've seen in the history of the world. So how do you counter that? How do you counter that automation and technology and innovation? You're not going to stop progress. How do you do it? You invest in education first and foremost, making sure that everybody has access to quality and affordable education, regardless of what neighborhood they're in. Right? That means investing more in pre-K, making sure that our high schools are better, making sure that folks are getting higher education and they don't graduate with $50,000 or $100,000 of student debt, and the government's making billions of dollars. That's unacceptable. I was talking to some public school teachers not too long ago. They came to visit me. I said, Patrick, we make between $42,000 to $45,000 a year. We all spend between $500 to $1,000 on supplies for our students, fine markers and pens and pencils, because they don't have enough from their families or the school district isn't providing it. So we've got to pick up the slack. And worse yet, one of the teachers explained to me that the books are so old and so dirty that she used to cut out the pages to find the clean pages, re-staple it, re-bind it together to give the students a book that they can actually read. And they have to rotate books between a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule. That sounds like a third world country. That's unacceptable. And just the fact that they don't have iPads and computers and laptops to bring home and study on, they're already behind. Much less they're rotating books. We've got to invest more in education. We've got to invest more in infrastructure. There's $2.5 trillion offshore right now that a lot of corporations and individuals are keeping offshore. Let's bring that money home. Right? Let's invest in roads, and bridges, schools, highways, IT. Quite literally paving the way for future generations. I support raising the minimum wage. I believe we do need tax reform. and comprehensive tax reform. Here's a stat that'll blow your mind, I think. If elected to the U.S. Senate, I would be the second CPA in the history of our country to serve there. Think there's anything wrong with our fiscal house? So, we do need tax reform. We need to make sure that we're protecting programs like Social Security and Medicare, to make sure that they're going to be there for future generations. And making sure we've got a floor in this country that nobody's going to fall through is critical. Right? These programs are under attack. And another issue, again, I don't think we have 15, 20 years to get right, is climate change. Everywhere I go in the state of Florida, I can see the impacts of it. I was in the Florida Keys with some family over the holidays. With an uncle of mine, he's been a charter boat fisherman his whole life, backcountry guy. He was explaining to me he had to change careers over Christmas because the areas where he used to take his clients are so polluted, so dirty, he doesn't catch fish anymore. So he became a realtor over the holidays and can't fish anymore. You go to Miami Beach, high tide, on Alton Road. There's 3 inches of salt water on Alton Road. I assure you it wasn't built underwater. Right in my district, billions and billions of gallons of toxic water coming out of Lake Okeechobee. I was in Apalachicola several months ago. All the oysters are dying there because the freshwater flows are changing. Everywhere I go around the state, we see a very direct impact of climate change. So we've got to start making investments necessary to change this trajectory we're on. And one of the things that I've learned is that you're never going to make everybody happy, right? Whether it's your family, whether it's business, and certainly public service. And I was sitting with my family. Some of the folks here know. My family governor, you do, Eric, you do, a couple of folks here met him. See, my dad is a Republican. And I went to sit with my family, we had a little round table like this, and I had them all there. Tell them I was going to run for Congress. And my he's a Republican. My mom, she's an independent. One of my brothers supports the Tea Party. I think he might have supported my first opponent. I don't know. Another brother, big Democrat. And then third brother doesn't know the difference between a Republican and a Democrat. Right? He's still trying to figure it out. So here I am with my family, and I'm talking to them about the things I care about, tax reform, Social Security, and I couldn't get them to agree with me on what was needed. I said, you know what? You're never going to make everybody happy. Do what you think is best. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? Use them proportionally. Right? Study the issues. Right? Do what you think is best. And understand, I ended up having one of the most independent voting records in the entire Congress. Because I don't put blinders on, I just show up and vote. I study the issue. I say, how is this going to affect my district? And how is this going to affect the state of Florida? How does this affect our country? Finally, how does it sit aside? A lot of these issues we deal with at the federal level are not so cut and dry. We got to dig deep. And that's ultimately why I'm in this. Because I enjoy studying these issues. I enjoy trying to be that voice for Florida. And hope that with your support and many others around the state of Florida, that I'll be the best, hardest working senator this state's ever seen. And my pledge to you all is that I will always be a strong voice for Florida. I'm going to show up to a committee. I'm going to show up and vote because I care about these issues and believe that we can really make a difference. So I appreciate all this, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, members, now remember you have 45 seconds to frame your questions. No speeches, and then
Congressman Murphy, you have 2 minutes to respond, okay?
all right, so everybody want to ask a question, raise your hand as you're talking.
Gentlemen, face shoot, whoever.
Thank you, Congressman. Bob Dillinger. The United States has 5% of the world's population. It has 25% of the world's incarcerated individuals. What would you do to change that?
Thank you. Thanks for getting straight to the point there. I'm a huge supporter of criminal justice reform. I've been working with Senator Cory Booker. I had a chance to talk to the President about this last week, actually. This school-to-prison pipeline is really bad in our country. And the math doesn't lie. 1 out of 3 black men in this country face the prospect of going to jail. That is unbelievable and wrong. We've got to do something. A lot of that starts with education and opportunity in the very beginning, right? But it also has to do with making sure that we are addressing some of the problems we have with the criminal justice system, right? And we've seen a lot of this more public, I think, thanks to cell phones and cameras. And you've seen a lot of what's happening in many neighborhoods, and been supporting quite a few pieces of legislation that address this, that help build more trust between the police and the neighborhood. That particular bill is called the Trust Act. There's one bill I'm supporting called Corey Jones bill. That was an unfortunate incident in my district where a young black man was killed by a undercover police officer. There's another piece of legislation I'm supporting with Congresswoman Corrine Brown, a body camera bill, and support quite a few pieces of legislation that give the funding from the federal government working with the state and local governments to make sure that our men in uniform have body cameras. So we have a better understanding of what is going on. There's more accountability and trust between the two. So these are important issues, things that have to be addressed, and I'm glad that they are coming to the surface.
They can't get it for the radio. So, sorry.
No problem. Yes, right here.
Beverly Midland, would you consider, when you were in the Senate, sponsoring a bill where the person running for president, there would be a criteria he would have to meet before he could run?
What do you get that here, Beverly? Yes, so, look, you know, in the Constitution, it's, you know, there are requirements that our founders put in there. Age is one of them, where you're born, etc. So I think we need to stick to that. And I am still, call me idealistic, but I have faith in the American people. And as I see, you know, what's happening with so many of these debates right now and some of these candidates, it is embarrassing right now. I talk to my friends in other countries, and they're looking at us and they're laughing. Because the truth is, they pretty much keep us at the top of the hill. We are the gold standard as it relates to democracy. And so much of what this country stands for is really under attack by a lot of folks running for president right now. And that's nothing to be proud of. In fact, that's something to be ashamed of. But I do believe there's a certain amount of anger and frustration out there where voters don't know how to necessarily take this out and how to, you know, get their frustrations heard. I do believe come election day that there is a very sharp contrast in the leading contenders, and that we are going to see, I think, the individual with the most experience, and I think the best position for the job win. And I have endorsed Secretary Clinton. I think she's as qualified as anybody we've ever had for the job, but it's an ugly process getting there.
Gil McMullen, candidate for Largo C3, Largo Commission C3. EPA recently floated new rules that were pretty stringent on both old and new forms of energy in the U.S. We hear a lot of talk about energy security. These were turned back at the Supreme Court level, though Supreme Court Justice John Roberts has allowed it to stand, evidently until a cost benefit can be done. Do you think these rules are fair to business? And is this standing of the rules temporarily a fair thing to business?
Let me start a big picture real quick. One of the pieces of legislation that I've been working hard with in a bipartisan manner is called the Regulatory Improvement Commission. This is legislation that goes through most of the zombie regulations. It's similar to the RAP setup, where we go through and look at hundreds of thousands of pages of regulations to get rid of the duplication and the waste. And whether that's at the local, federal, state level, making sure they're all online, using technology to our advantage. So if you are a small business person, it doesn't take 5 or 6 attorneys just to get off the ground and 5 weeks of startup. That is actually, I think, leading partially to this divide in big businesses and small in this country, because it's becoming so much tougher for that little business, that startup, to get off the ground in the first place. However, I would say that the attempts right now in the EPA are trying to both use the carrot and the stick approach to moving toward renewable energy. I'm a firm and strong believer in renewable, and whether that's solar or wind, thermal, tidal, pick it. I support all of them and believe we need to start getting off this addiction to fossil fuels. Natural gas, I believe, is a bridge to help us get there. But you look at the jobs being created just from solar, for example, way more jobs being created from solar than coal, much better paying jobs. And I would argue from a business standpoint, any business in here who, would look at their, P&L, look at their financial statements, would see that energy cost is 15–20% of what they're spending. Imagine if you didn't have to pay that energy piece, and you had basically free energy. Right? Imagine where that money could go. It could go into education, go into paying your employees more, go to reinvesting in your community. And if you think of that from a country standpoint, if we don't have to worry about the cost of energy, think of how much money will be out there to reinvest in other things. So I think this is about American security, making us stronger, and the first country that figures out the best solar panels, the best wind, etc. With a broken windmill or what? Whoever comes up with the best technologies, I think, will be better off. Yes. Red straw.
Betty Morgenstein, you said a lot of nice things that I agree with. One thing you haven't mentioned, though, is the immigration problem in this country. Can you speak to that?
So you say immigration problem, I would argue that being an Irish American, that immigration is part of what made this country so beautiful. Right? That diversity is what America is all about. So I believe in comprehensive immigration reform. I do believe, and I did support legislation that came out of the Senate, passed, I think there were 68 senators that voted for it. In this day and age, that's really bipartisan. It didn't come to the House floor, but basically what it did is there were a couple of key elements to it. Number one is it invested more in border security. Made sure we're tracking individuals coming to this country legally, that they don't overstay their visa. So I support that. I also believe that the 11 to 12 million undocumented workers in this country deserve a pathway to citizenship, right? Where they're paying their back taxes, right? If they're a criminal, they're kicked out. But the vast majority are hard-working folks, right? Trying to be better by their family, by their kids and grandkids. Right? Let's make sure they're on a pathway to citizenship, right? Again, paying those back taxes, getting them back in line, making sure they're not criminals. But also making sure we're talking about some of the most qualified people in the world that are being educated at Harvard or Stanford or some of the great schools here in Florida. And they graduate and we kick them out. What in the world is that? I talked to some folks at Facebook not too long ago. They told me that 95% of the people they're hiring aren't from this country. 95%. That's terrible. They want to hire Americans, but we're not training enough good ones. So we, I believe, need to make sure that those best minds around the world are staying here, coming here, that will continue to be that magnet, but we don't kick them out after. So it's a comprehensive bill that would address all of them. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Marilia Dredge. I'd like your opinion on the question of Apple versus FBI vis-a-vis our security as a nation.
So, being on the Intelligence Committee, there's a lot of things I can talk about, and a lot of things I can't talk about. There is an ongoing, investigation and reasons for that at a high level. And I'm not trying to dodge the question, but there's a reason I preface it with that. And believe that national security has to be first and foremost in this country. And I will err on that side. But I do believe privacy is a very serious concern. I believe the actual court order that was issued should be revised, that the government isn't necessarily getting that encryption code to get into the phone. I do understand the slippery slope there, but believe we should be asking Apple to unlock it themselves. They can be in charge of however they do it. We don't need to necessarily know how they did it in this case, but as long as we continue to believe in the court system in this country, and if there's a warrant and the court says we need to get into that, then we're going to continue to follow the rule of law. We should have the ability to get the information out of that film. And I believe that's the way we should move forward. But you see what Apple's doing now is they're putting out phones and technology that cannot be decrypted, they're saying. This is going to lead to a much bigger, broader argument in the next several years that hasn't played out yet. And I would argue after the Edward Snowden revelations, we haven't thoroughly had this conversation in our country because of the balance, constantly. Where we are all slightly worried about Big Brother and making sure we have that privacy, but we've got to make sure that national security is a priority. And the stuff that I learn about on a day-to-day basis in the Intelligence Committee is very alarming. And we need to make sure we have all the resources and all the capabilities possible to prevent this from happening again. And looking forward, that these, that we, our companies in this country, have, America's protection and can do whatever they can to protect us as well. Yes.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Corey Adler. I would like for you to walk me through an issue that I have a conversation about all the time. I don't know the answer. So when you're talking about being the most expensive congressional race ever, $30 million, there's a lot of candidates that have started out in this presidential race that have dropped out, and there's money on the table. And I want to know what's going on with that money, and are they required to give the money back, or are they required to give the money to the PAC? Or can they give it to organizations that work in communities that help them?
So I don't want to get too far out of my lane here. The money in politics, I'll start off by saying, is disgusting. I think we all hate it, I assume. I don't know, I certainly do as a candidate, because most of it's targeted at candidates, and it's negativity these days. My understanding is that money they can keep in an account. I don't think there's a legal obligation to give it back to the folks that supported them. I think there are charities that they can give it to. I don't know. I really don't know. I've been lucky enough not to lose an election, so I didn't have to do it. But I think there's certain charitable organizations you can give it to. I am pretty sure you can't live off that money. You can't use it for personal gain. There are 60 Minutes did a piece on this, that the PACs, not super PACs, but PACs, that candidates can set up, that they can do certain things with in their careers, but again, can't live off of them. And I'm happy to get you the short write-up from a campaign attorney, but it's out of my lane. Just start with the back.
Thank you. My name is Gary Hartfield. Senator Murphy, last fall, the Department of Labor handed down a home care rule that directly impacts assisted living and group home owners. Being that Florida is, such a huge state in regards to residential care for assisted living and, of course, group homes, it's directly impacted our ability to provide that service. Can you speak to that home care rule and what may be going on in terms of legislation at the federal level or even at the state?
Thank you for bringing that up. As I mentioned, I'm the congressperson for the third most senior district in the country, so a lot of assisted living facilities in my district. My grandmother was recently diagnosed with dementia, and we all probably have certain stories about loved ones close to us that we've seen going into these homes. And with the baby boomers aging, there's going to be a lot more of it. I've had several talks with Secretary Perez at the Department of Labor about this very specific issue. And oftentimes, at the federal level, there is good intent about regulation, whether that's sarcastically, etc. But the implementation is much different. And oftentimes they paint a broad brush and paint all businesses the same. When I believe we should be targeting and spending more money going after the bad actors, using technology, for example, to go after those that are taking advantage of these seniors, not giving them the care that they deserve. We're charging Medicare, Medicaid, which is our taxpayer money, etc., and going about it that way. Here's a great number. For every dollar invested going after Medicare, Medicaid fraud, the government makes 11 on that. 11-to-1 ratio. You spend $1 going after it, unfortunately in South Florida, mine specifically, is really where most of this takes place, a lot of this fraud. So I argued to the secretary, let's go after the bad actors, right? Let's look at the patients, let's look at what they're charging for, how long they're there for, whether it's hospice, et cetera, the medications they're on, how many checkups they're getting, and see the outliers. And if there's a standard deviation or two outside the norm, that's where we, I think, the federal government, the regulators need to be going after them, not going after so many of the good actors and good businesses out there. Yes, we'll go here.
Eric Gerard. I may not know very much, so I'd love to have an answer for this. I was looking at your campaign material that's on all the tables around here, and nowhere does it mention that you're in Congress or your party affiliation. Is there something that prevents you from that, or a certain level of shame?
No, I don't even know what's passed out today. So I am in Congress. I actually don't know the legalities of that. I just spoke about it. I speak about it all the time being in Congress and talk about being a Democrat. But I also always remind people I care about solving problems and getting things done, and that's what I care about. I imagine there's a lot of accomplishments and things in there that we've discussed. Surprised to hear that, but have to look at it. Yes, sir. This work.
Tim Gillespie. The New York Times, a liberal paper, Wall Street Journal, a conservative paper, have covered news and suggested a lot of white males voting for Rubio, Cruz, and Trump are driven by racism and also driven by a fact they do not like President Obama. I'd like you to comment on that and how the Democratic Party can unify the divisions or the identifiers that are predominant in our society. They play all the time in the media.
There's no question that quite a few of the candidates are playing for sort of lowest common denominator. Some of the folks screaming aloud that they are candidates. That is not the America that I know. That's not the America I grew up in or proud of. That set that exists. But you look at just this week, Donald Trump denying his knowledge of what they could do with his KKK. He did afterwards, but just the fact that there was pause there, I think speaks to your point about article. And it's something I would say, whether Republican, Democrat, Independent, no party affiliation, whatever, we should be ashamed of. Right? This country's had an unfortunate history, as many have, of discrimination. And it's something we have to constantly fight against. Right? There's so many different examples of that. And that fight shouldn't be partisan. It's something that all Americans have to fight against. And I hope that whomever the next president is, that their number one objective is uniting this country. Not continuing and not, calling names. And that's nonsense. Right? They got to unite the country. And you can't unite a country if you're calling people names and just appealing to a very small group of folks. So I hope that we, all candidates in the room, all candidates running for any office, rise above that and start focusing more on the issues, right? Some of the issues we discussed. Yes, I agree.
I was told, okay, good. She knows I can't stand too well. My name is Terry Bryant. One of my greatest concerns is the deficit that the United States of America is in. We're supposed to be the greatest country in the world and the richest, but yet we are so indebted to China, for example, who's our greater importer. So I'd like to know, what is the process that we go about in paying off our debt? Yet we have money on the other side that we can go and give millions of dollars to other countries when they're having disastrous areas. I just don't understand the process, and that's what I'm asking for a great explanation. And when do you think we ever get out of there? Again.
Great question, and this is something I talk a lot about, that freshman bipartisan group I started called United Solutions. The number one focus of that group is getting our fiscal house in order. That included tax reform. All right, that included making sure that programs like Social Security and Medicare are going to be there for future generations, addressing the waste, the fraud, the abuse, the duplication in this country. And it's important, I think, to keep it in context. Right now, our annual deficits have been reduced by almost 3/4. A lot of people don't realize that. The comprehensive debt that we have is now over 19 trillion. As a percentage of debt to GDP, which is really, I believe, the ratio that matters the most, it's around 75%. You mentioned China. Their debt to GDP is upwards of 250%. There are many, many countries out there with massive debts. There are many economists arguing that there is somewhat of a house of cards around the world with all this debt being shared, bought, purchased from each other, that is going to have to come home to roost eventually. I believe that we have to play the long game to get that debt in line. We cannot do it overnight. It took years and years and years to get us here. It wasn't one single president or policy. It was decades of mistakes that got us to this place. And I believe that we get the best return on investment, the best ROI, by investing in America. Things like education that I mentioned, things like infrastructure. That might cost a little bit in the front end. But imagine if this country didn't have a highway system, or ports, or bridges. We wouldn't have an economy. By the same token, we better be investing in IT. We better be investing in the best brains of tomorrow. And while it might cost a little bit now, it's going to pay off in droves down the road. So, number one thing we got to do is grow this economy. You do that by economic certainty and predictability. Government shutdowns, sequesters, and fiscal cliffs are not the answer. Businesses want certainty. How do you do that? By finding that common ground to solve problems. Thank you.
Okay, this will be the last question.
Go to Adam in the back. He was thank you.
Thanks. I'm Adam Smith. So when you talk about the, I think you said disgusting amount of money that's in politics today, I wonder what you would tell Democrats in this primary who might be worried that there's one Republican builder in Florida that's pumping hundreds of thousands of dollars into your campaign, your father obviously, and whether you would be open to telling your father, no, the appearances here might be unseemly, stop.
Yeah, Adam, you know, I hate the money in politics, and I hate sort of gotcha questions too. Look, the money is disgusting in politics. A big part of why I'm in this is to change the rules. I'm on every single piece of legislation to overturn Citizens United. And I will continue fighting to overturn Citizens United because we have to. I would also argue we've got to do something with the hard money piece of politics and the amount of time that elected officials and candidates spend raising money, not focused on the issue. Whether you're running for the House, Senate, President, Mayor, Commissioner, all of it is broken. So I'm on every single bill out there to make sure we get the money out of politics, and that's what the focus needs to be. Thank you.
Chandra goes around and collects the ballots. We're going to announce each one. Okay, close.